Happy afternoon, boys and girls. Thanksgiving at the Tappletons by Eileen Spinelli, illustrated by Marianne Coca Leffler. Thanksgiving at the Templetons was always a big day. Thanksgiving at the Templetons meant, of course, the Tappleton family. Mr. Tappleton, Mrs. Tappleton, Jenny Tappleton, Kenny Tappleton, and grandmother and grandfather Tappleton, and Aunt Hetta and Uncle Fritz, and most certainly, of course, the turkey and the trimmings. It was still dark when Mrs. Tappleton lit the oven and took the big turkey out of the refrigerator. Just then, someone knocked at the kitchen door. It was Mike the milkman. "Good morning, Mrs. Tappleton. I thought you might like some eggnog for the holidays." As Mrs. Tappleton reached for the eggnog, the turkey slipped out from under her arm. Now, on a warmer day, that might not have been a problem, but this Thanksgiving day was quite cold, and the step was covered in ice. Before she or Mike could even think, the turkey had slithered into the yard. "Get it!" shouted Mrs. Tappleton. Mike reached for it, but the turkey skidded right past him, through the gate and into the street. "Hurry! Stop that turkey!" The milkman chased the turkey. Mrs. Tappleton chased the milkman, and the turkey slid down the hill into the pond. Plop, splash, and it bobbled completely out of sight. When Mr. Tappleton came down to breakfast, he took a long sniff. "I don't smell turkey," he said to his wife. "Of course you don't smell turkey," she replied. "You have a cold." "I don't have a cold," she insisted. Mrs. Tappleton shook some pepper in the air and her husband sneezed. "See, you do have a cold." After breakfast, Mr. Tappleton put on his coat and scarf and hat and gloves. "I'm going to the bakery to buy our pies." Mrs. Tappleton handed him his boots. "Wear these," she said. "I know for a fact it's quite slippery out." Sim's bakery was so crowded the line reached out into the sidewalk. Mr. Tappleton hated to wait in long lines, so he went to the diner for a cup of coffee. By the time he got back, the long line was gone, and so were the pies. No pumpkin, no mince, no rhubarb, nothing. Mr. Tappleton was afraid to go home with nothing. "2 boxes tied up with string, please," he said. Mrs. Sim stared at him. "You mean 2 empty boxes?" "Yep, that's right." "My, they feel really light," remarked Mrs. Tappleton. "Certainly they are light," retorted Mr. Tappleton. "Mrs. Sims prides herself on how light her pies are." Mrs. Tappleton set the table. She called her son. "Kenny, you may make the salad. There's lettuce in the crisper and carrots and radishes too." Kenny's face grew pale. He had given all of that to the rabbits in Mr. Buttersworth's class. How could he tell his mother? He couldn't. So he covered the empty salad bowl with aluminum foil and stuck it back into the refrigerator. Uh-oh. When the others went to pick up the relatives at the train station, Jenny stayed behind to mash the potatoes. Every year this was her job. She loved it. This year, she thought, "I'll make them even better. I'll use the blender." Just as Jenny flicked on the switch, the phone rang. It was her best friend, Nora. If there was one thing Jenny loved to do better than mashed potatoes, it was to talk. Jenny talked and talked and talked and talked to Nora. She might still be talking today, had not been for the wet glump of something that hit her on the side of the head. She turned to see what it was, and splat! Another glump hit her right in the face. The blender was growing wild, and so were the mashed potatoes. They were flying everywhere. Without even saying goodbye to Nora, Jenny hung up the phone, scrubbed her face, and wiped mashed potatoes from nearly everywhere in the kitchen. She finished just as the others came back. Uncle Fritz patted his stomach. "Boy, I'm really hungry," he said. Grandfather Templeton laughed. "I'm as hungry as an elephant." Everyone sat down at the table. It was a Templeton tradition for Grandmother to say the Thanksgiving prayer. "As soon as the turkey is ready," she smiled. "I'm as hungry as 2 elephants," said Grandfather. Mr. Templeton went to the oven. "I'll carve the turkey now." He opened the oven door. The turkey is gone. Mr. Templeton searched the table and under the table and in every kitchen cabinet. He looked into the sink and the broom closet. "I can't find the turkey anywhere." Mrs. Templeton took a deep breath. She told him how their turkey had slipped out the door and down the steps and across the yard and through the gate and down the street and pop, splash into the pond. "So much for the turkey," said Uncle Fritz, and his stomach rumbled a little louder. "Never mind," said Aunt Hedda good-naturedly. "We'll fill up with the trimmings." "I'll get the salad," Jenny announced. "Then Grandmother can say the prayer." Jenny set the bowl on the table and peeled off the foil. Everyone stared at the salad. "I fed the rabbits at school," confessed Kenny. Uncle Fritz looked downright gloomy. "So much for the salad." His stomach rumbled again. "I'm as hungry as 3 elephants now." Kenny jumped up. "We'll have Jenny's mashed potatoes." He brought the pot from the kitchen and lifted the lid. "I was on the phone and the blender went wild." "So much for the potatoes." Uncle Fritz's stomach rumbled even more. "I'm as hungry as 4 elephants." "The pies!" cried Mrs. Templeton. "I'll get the pies." "I'll say grace as soon as the pies are cut." Mrs. Templeton brought in the boxes, set them down, and untied the string. "You brought home 2 empty boxes?" 5 elephants, groaned Grandfather. The dining room was quiet. Everyone looked down at the empty table. Uncle Fritz muttered something, but it could not have been heard above the rumble of his stomach. A tear rolled down Jimmy's cheek. "No Thanksgiving dinner. Nothing to say a prayer for," said Kenny. Grandmother smiled. "Of course there's something. There is more to Thanksgiving than turkey and trimmings." And then Grandmother Templeton asked everyone to bow their heads and to hold hands around the dining room table. "And this is the Thanksgiving prayer," she said. "Turkeys come and turkeys go, and trimmings can be lost, we know. But we're together. That's what matters, not what's served upon the platters. Amen." "That was a wonderful prayer," said Aunt Hedda. Mrs. Templeton jumped up. "We have liverwurst and cheese in the refrigerator. I'll help fix the sandwiches." Jenny wiped away her tears. "I'll get the pickles." Kenny laughed. "I'll open the jar of applesauce for dessert." And so the Templetons had their Thanksgiving dinner after all. Uncle Fritz's stomach stopped rumbling, and Grandfather Templeton ate enough liverwurst to feed 6 elephants. In fact, everyone had plenty to eat. But most of all, they had each other. And they wrote here on their picture, their very best Thanksgiving.